advice is, look, there's a very well-trodden path here. The investors in Silicon Valley and the investors that are used to funding technology companies are used to seeing Delaware corporations. So just go with a Delaware corporation, and there are many, many people in the valley that can help create one.
All right, question here from the front row.
My name is Shaheen Kazi, and I'm the founder of a company that is building a virtual try-on solution for apparel shopping. And I have a question for the panel, but in particular for Aaron. And that goes back to the topic of customer and market validation. How high within your customer, if your customers are enterprise, how high within the customer enterprise do you have to go to get legit validation?
It's a really interesting question, because when I was talking earlier about this kind of validation, I was talking about consumer side. But Shopkick, as you're pointing out, actually has these very large corporate partners, and there the process is quite different. We have found that we're essentially a marketing program. There's not a single example of one of any of our customers where at least the CMO was not the driving force, and often the CEO. And when you're doing something that's disruptive and that's new, it's not in anybody's budget. And what's more, it's not part of what anybody at the VP level is charged with doing. It's much more, there's a very high-level strategic concern. What does mobile mean for us? We know it means something big. Right now everyone's talking about showrooming. This is a big deal, but nobody's VP of anti-showrooming. So, we found that we really needed C-level buy-in, and in those organizations where we were at the VP or director level, unless we could really get the CMO or the CEO excited and interested, that for us, that those initiatives stalled out.
Question at the back.
So this question is from Nisha. So there's a lot of talk about open innovation and crowd computing, where you take the collective intelligence of the crowd to get feedback. Now, if in situations where the crowd and somebody outside the company gives some idea, who owns the IP in that case?
Well, it depends on the nature of the idea, but if you're just getting feedback from people outside the company, that's actually not even really something that would necessarily be normally viewed as IP. It's more like market information and data on the product or the product proposal.
But for example, Adobe has something called ideas.adobe.com. Now you can get on, and then for their products, any of their products, you can ask for new features or new changes in the product. So the IP is owned by Adobe in that case?
Yes, normally when they're soliciting things like that, somewhere on the website there'll be some fine print that says whatever you give them is theirs, not yours.
This is a really tricky area. We looked at a company that did kind of crowdsourced web development work. I won't name the company, but basically they had a community of people, and they would post the work, and people would bid on the work, and the people would do the work and get paid, and the cost was 1/10 of what people were paying. And many of the people that were doing the work were in international countries, and we didn't make the investment, although maybe I'll kick myself for this later, but because this issue of who owned the IP to that work wasn't clear, especially when you took the international flavor of that into account. It's a quite complicated area.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ganapati, and my question seems again directed towards the corporate attorney on stage, but would love to hear input from all the other entrepreneurs and from the VCs. I would like to hear of best known methods of how you would leave your current employer so as to ensure that your current employer doesn't come after you because of some previous work that they claim belongs to you.
That's a complicated question. It's difficult to generalize, but I think certainly not taking anything with you is a good starting point.
But what does it mean, not taking anything?
I mean, not physically taking papers, code, and anything that the employer could claim belong to the employer. You know, people don't normally, as you go out the door, rummage through the box of things that you're carrying. This isn't normally tightly policed, so it's incumbent on you as the employee to do it. But these things come back to haunt people. It all seems fine for a while, and then if litigation begins, there can be discovery and people are deposed, and things can come out later that weren't well known before. So it's a tricky situation.
All right, we're going to
Yeah,
go over
we
here.
have a question for Aaron here. I think we're in a bit of a dilemma. My name is Rahul, and we run a social commerce business. And the question these days when facing VCs is, the dilemma is between disruptive business models versus build something simple. Shopping generally is very frictional, too expensive to pull off. Any of these studies we are finding now to actually validate the models are actually very expensive to get in front of consumers, right? $10 per user kind of metrics that you cannot pull it off with bootstrapping. And so it's so tempting to actually go and do something simpler that has less friction, skip the shopping phase. Do you guys fight that same sort of battle within your group? And how would you guide us as to stay the course and raise money still in spite of that?
Yeah, we sometimes look with some envy at social networks or other things where you can just have get on a great viral growth curve and sign up tens of millions of users, but there's a barrier to entry built into what we're doing that's also quite valuable. So the more traction we gain, the harder we are to compete with. So we actually think there's quite a bit of value to that friction as well, because others will feel it when they're trying to compete with you if you can manage to get out in front. I don't know enough about your specific situation to have any advice, but I would say, be creative about validating things. I mean, I went out to a bunch of shopping malls and stores, and I did first I just trailed people and watched what they were doing, and put together a lot of qualitative and quantitative observations. And then I was just walking up to people in a Target and asking them questions about how they were shopping and what they were doing with their lists and so on. I did that for days. We were getting kicked out by security teams at one store after another. But it actually, it's kind of interesting. It's a good sales training, probably, just walking up to strangers and asking them a bunch of personal questions. But people actually like to help also. When you introduce yourself properly, you say, hey, we're thinking of starting a company doing this, and would you help me? And they really like that. Chances are, if you're kind of going, we'll go to a market research firm and learn something, you can do it a lot more cheaply yourself, and just be disciplined about the questionnaires and having the consistent answers. But we learned a lot by doing those kinds of things with just investment of some time.
Well, from the VC's perspective, stick down the disruptive path and get creative, like Aaron said. That's the word that the venture community wants to hear come out of your mouth, is disruptive and not easy. So you just have to get creative.
It's the seed investors.
So, Bish, we're 2 or 3 minutes over. Maybe take a couple more questions. Is that all right? We won't go too much long. There's one in the back, and then Paul next, please.
So this is for Aaron again. Kind of a little bit follow up on what you were just talking about. I first learned about Shopkick last year, and I actually heard you speak. And so I'm kind of curious, how did you get these big companies, Target, Macy's, Best Buy, I believe, and several others? Because I was actually quite impressed with the sort of prime time lineup of customers you had. But you also not only had to get them involved, but you had to get them to put transmitters in their store. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because it's even a bigger sort of jump than just getting them on board.
And I think next to mobile operators, retailers are the toughest ones to get.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey. So these are large organizations. They historically don't move so fast. One thing that really helped us is, as Dave put it, their hair was on fire. They're worried about mobile, and they're looking at threats to their business coming from mobile. And we were able to come to them with an opportunity for their business in mobile, and offer the potential that this thing that they're seeing as a threat actually can be turned to their advantage. Now that's the kind of thing, to the question that was asked earlier, that really only resonates with a CEO or CMO kind of a person, because no one else is really chartered with that or has the authority to do something like that. The transmitter is interesting because it is and it actually came out of some of the early learning that we went through as well, where one of the things we found out was that none of the sensors on the phone really gave accurate enough location information to base a rewards program that rewarded users for going there. So we said, all right, in that case, we have to come up with our own technology for that. You know, I believe in taking risks. I believe in doing disruptive things. So it was fun to just kind of commit to that and figure out what it was going to be later. It turned out to be an ultrasonic transmitter, where we're modulating data over frequencies that you can't hear. And it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you could say, well, wow, that's a lot of friction. You know, for these large retailers, it's actually expensive for them, even though the device itself is like a nightlight, it just plugs in. It's expensive for them to go and send out, you know, store operations teams to thousands of stores and install a device in every single one of them. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. But on the other hand, it's also been a very powerful tool for us because it's something that only we can do. Because everybody else looked at that kind of thing and went, oh, that's really nasty and hairy and frictional and you know. And as a result, we're actually the only company that can go to a retailer and go, you know what? We can know the moment somebody walks in your door, and we can give them a reward, and that's a real differentiator for us. And you know, something like a capital expense to do this, that's something that retailers understand very well. They're accustomed to paying for things. And so it's actually been in some ways an advantage, as well as obviously you know, some friction. So you know, if you look at it the right way, you can often take some of these things that look a little ugly and scary and turn them to your advantage. I think that's definitely happened here.
All right, the last question goes to Paul. Paul, I know, is a repeat successful entrepreneur in his own right and an active Thai volunteer, so it's highly appropriate that you get the last word.
Thank you. So I think I have a question for the panel. I mean, I think a lot of things you guys said in theory are all correct, but I always find that disruption and validation are contrary. They're very contradictory. You may say, go do something disruptive and then do the validation. And I don't think both of them really work that well, as you might say. Because I remember in my first experience, we talked to 5 customers, and 3 of them said, voice over IP, never going to happen in my lifetime. I mean, now every network is based on that. So if I'd gone with that validation, I would have never done a company. So I just want to kind of get your thoughts on as to, and especially Dave, you mentioned if the CIO doesn't have it in budget in 2012, my feeling is if a startup is coming to you for 2012 budget, it's probably already too late because the bigger companies already know this. So I'd like, you know, you guys to comment on it so that people don't walk away with what the validation should look like.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it does, you do want to get the integration of a whole bunch of things, which is why venture people probably invest in 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 250 things they see. So yes, I mean, what we would be looking for is a hair on fire pain point that also has some future disruption in it. So it's not like we wouldn't focus on the word disruption, but in today's environment, we also want to be able to see that there's some traction that can be had, you know, on day one. And it depends a little bit on where you are as a venture firm. Our firm would be early stage, not necessarily seed. And your question depends a little bit on where in the process you are. Obviously, a late stage firm is all about what have you sold and what are you going to sell, and an angel and a seed is probably more focused on the disruption. So we're kind of in the middle of those two, and we would be interested in both questions.
All right, I'd like to close out this panel with 3 thank yous. First and foremost, to the audience, thank you so much for being attentive and great questions in the discussion. Second, to Ty, the volunteers, and everyone involved in organizing this. And finally, to this great bunch of folks who've given us the evening in the spirit of giving back. So let's give them a big round.
you, Ujjal, very much. I also wanted to recognize Ujjal's wife, Sarita. She's here, and his son. I haven't met him. No. So anyway, thank you very much for coming over here and giving support to Ujjal as well. And again, thanks again to all the great panelists. This was really very good. And Ujjal, thank you very much for putting a lot of efforts. As you don't know, we had almost like 25, 30 emails back and forth over the weekend also. So really a lot of time and efforts went into it. So thanks again. Let's give them a big round of applause.